of imperialism in Europe, and to a large extent here in the United States. Sam was very clear about this, and I think it's probably the most important part of his global war thesis. And that was in order for the class struggle on a global basis to be realized and embraced and owned by everyone consciously, it would be necessary at the soonest possible time for the revolutionary energy and fervor that is so far in the East, in the most oppressed parts of the world, for that to move, not leave, but move into the imperialist centers, particularly in the United States. Sam, in his 53 document, called this the missing link, that is the awakening of the US working class, this powerful sleeping giant, and an understanding that what it does, what it's prepared to do, is not only immediately decisive for struggles here in the United States, but because it's the working class at the center of world imperialism, it's decisive for the entire world. This was the special role that the workers and the oppressed of this country needed to live up to. They haven't done it yet, but things are starting, as we see in all these tremendous organizing drives led by young workers of all kinds. We'll talk more about that today. There are many things about Sam's document that have changed over 70 years, because change is the order of life. Everything changes. But not this point, the point about the link, the critical link in the chain being the awakening and the embracing of the struggle by the workers in this country. Sam died 25 years ago, and that's a good excuse to review Sam's main contributions. Times have made, in my opinion, Sam's contributions even clearer and more important than they were at the time of his death. You can describe Marcy's legacy in a lot of ways. The reviving and the rebuilding of the revolutionary forces, but also the reviving of a worldwide working class movement, a revolutionary movement that has a world socialist revolution perspective. This was this perspective of the October Revolution, the perspective that the various detachments of the working class, while they may be geographically separated and separated by a lot of things, they are still together and they are still independent. And that was true then, that was true in 1917, and it's all the more true now. Today, we define the working class, its strengths, its weaknesses, very differently than the working class that Sam was describing 70 years ago. It's changed in many, many ways because of the vast changes that are constantly taking place. Because of technology, the global working class is far more centralized, in many ways, far more together. This is not a good thing for the class enemy. And it's far more aware of itself because of communications technology. And there are all the other reasons that it's becoming more revolutionary and more united. Sam was not interested in polemicizing against our opponents in the movement for the sake of polemicizing. He was much more interested in what new ground could be broken among revolutionary forces, forces dedicated to socialist revolution and in the struggle, particularly the most oppressed workers. What success, what can be done to bring these forces together? Not to put aside differences, but to understand that we're working toward a higher level of unity. This is what Sam was dedicated to. I don't think there's anything more central to his legacy than this. Sam always wanted to know what's going on amongst the most oppressed sections of our class. He wanted to know the situation because he felt that the working class ability to understand this and to intervene in it, that was decisive for the oppressed and for the goal of world socialist revolution. Sam saw that a lot of the problems of the working class, the fragmentation, the backwardness, the sectarianism, that to a large extent, this stemmed from years, sometimes decades of setbacks and defeats, but that we should not be weary. As a matter of fact, revolutionaries should be strengthened by the challenge of overcoming these problems, overcoming the fragmentation. Sam was an apostle of revolutionary class unity, one way or another. I think that's a big part of his legacy. Back in the time that when he wrote this document, The Global Class War, he was also fighting his comrades inside the SWP. He wanted them to be on the picket lines at the court hearings of the leaders of the Communist Party of the United States who were being tried during the McCarthy era and threatened with jail. Many of them spent many, many years in jail. A few of them died in jail. He wanted the SWP to be stronger, coming out in defense of the Rosenbergs. And why not? And to get over what he called the differences that, as important as they might be, should not be barriers to showing this kind of solidarity. Sam was a human being, and as such, like all humans, he had his contradictions. We all do. But I'll tell you, you could never find a better role model for a revolutionary than Sam Marcy. He despised sectarianism. He despised chauvinism and all forms of bigotry. His biggest principle was always put what was in the interest of the working class first. If you're arguing a point, if you're arguing with comrades, if you're arguing with opponents, never let your ego and your anger be the decisive thing in the decisions that you make. Make what is in the best interest of the working class the basis for the decisions that you make. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in '93, Comrade Sam and the party was invited to a meeting in Brussels of forces around the world, and particularly in Europe, who remained revolutionary. And Sam wrote a short but brilliant document for that Brussels conference, where he called upon everyone there, in spite of their different histories, in spite of what they call themselves, Stalin or Trotsky or whatever, Mao, to unite around a Leninist revolutionary basis, that this was time, even though it was a very heavy time, a big setback, the biggest setback imaginable, it was also time for us to become revolutionary. Sam saw the necessity of reforging the revolutionary vanguard and advised us accordingly. Be politically strong and mature in how you carry out the struggle, and this will enable you to bring others together. Now that we're in the midst of a multiplying world crisis with all sorts of of new crises, the economy, the Ukraine war. I'm sure that Comrade Sarah is probably going to, speak her mind about the Pentagon shooting down a Chinese aircraft somehow, and how significant that is. The important thing, comrades, is that we begin this year inspired by Sam's record to reacquaint ourselves with everything that made Sam the revolutionary that he was. He was unique in so many ways. He always grasped the lessons of the past. He lived mostly in the future because you have to as a revolutionary, but he was always looking forward. His eyes were always on the prize, and that was world socialist revolution.
All right, I think we're about to play a video, if I'm right. A talk. If that's not happening, that's okay. I just want to. Okay, looks like we are.
We would be remiss in our duty if we engaged only in a superficial analysis of the situation without going into the guts of the issue. And that is what is it all about in Russia and in China. See? Because if we hide our face and say, well, we can't change the situation over there, but we can carry on the struggle over here. But that isn't true. That isn't true. The U.S. and China are in a constant struggle. First and foremost, because China is still, although we tend to forget it, in the light of its recent initiatives and development, there's still work to stay. It is still a progressive social system compared to imperialism. And while it has deviated in its politics dramatically over the years and is moving faster and faster in the direction of capitalism, we should not take the position that it's all over in China and that we have only ourselves to look to. A similar situation arose during before the Second World War, at a time when the Soviet Union, under the leadership then of Stalin, in an effort to avoid an imperialist attack from the allies of France, Britain, and the U.S., pulled a diplomatic turnaround and made a pact with Nazi Germany. That stunned the movement, so the Nazis were regarded as the main and fundamental enemy at that time, which it might have been politically and worldwide. But from a class point of view, Hitler's regime was a capitalist regime, no less capitalist than France, Britain, and England. That the real fight between them, France, Britain, England, and Germany, was a fight over the colonies. A fight of who's to get who, now that Germany had freed itself from the Versailles Treaty and said it won't be treated anymore as a colony, and that it is necessary for it to take back what it had before, and that Germany was to be reconstituted as it was during at least the First World War. And it's on that basis that the Second World War took place. It had nothing to do with democracy or freedom or whatever. It had to do between the rivalry of the two biggest imperialist blocs at the time. But the question still remains, why?
Hi, all. Thank you for your patience. I know the volume on some of the talks is a little bit low. We have our volumes all the way up, and we're hoping that further videos won't have that issue. They're old recordings. Just to remind you all, the opening talks today will be answering why are class consciousness and international solidarity our most powerful weapons, and what did Lenin and Sam mean by revolutionary defeatism, especially in opposing an imperialist war. Our next speaker is RJ Red. RJ is a member of the Buffalo, New York branch and is a contributing writer for Workers' World. They are an organizer with Starbucks Workers United and helped organize the first corporate-owned Starbucks union in the US.
Thank you, comrade, and welcome everybody today. Thanks for coming on the program. Sam Marcy was somebody that I never got a chance to meet, but if I had a chance, I would have many questions to ask him. Sam Marcy has impacted my own politics in profound ways. His political teachings not only helped to clarify a general understanding of the world for me, but also gave me the particular knowledge that I needed for specific fights, like the fight to build the Starbucks Workers United, in which we won the first recognized Starbucks union in the US here in Buffalo, and has since spread across the country to nearly 300 stores. Sam taught me that class consciousness and international solidarity are inseparable. Once you understand the worldwide nature of the capitalist system, the imperialist system, you understand that you are in a global class war. You also understand that you have comrades and allies all over the world. Many organizations on the left use the term revolutionary defeatism, advocating for the defeat of one's own imperialist government in a war, something that's indispensable to us in stopping the US NATO-led imperialist proxy war in Ukraine. But Sam also spoke of revolutionary defensism, that is, in defense of our global class. This means defending the revolutionary gains made by our class and being clear about the fact that not only do we take up the defense of countries against imperialism on the basis of self-determination, but also that we defend worker states as worker states, regardless of any setbacks that occurred under the pressures of imperialism. Whether it's the guerrillas in the jungles of the Philippines or India struggling to fight a people's war for our class, or communists in Cuba, Vietnam, or China struggling to maintain proletarian power against their own domestic reactionaries and the external imperialist menace, or freedom fighters on the front lines in Palestine, fighting for the freedom against Zionism and US imperialism, Sam has given us the political tools to navigate these developments in our world, as well as the contradictions that may come with them, and maintaining a rock-solid defense of our class on all fronts. We must defend the burgeoning workers' movements at home and around the world, and defend those that have stood the test of time and stood their ground. Revolutionary defeatism and revolutionary defensism must go hand in hand. Sam did an excellent job of tying the struggles around the world to the struggles at home. He reminded us that there is no destiny for workers in the US separate from the workers of the whole world, and that we must approach the class struggle always from an international perspective. Much of these writings were invaluable to me in my union struggle at Starbucks, as well as his analysis of the limitations on the traditional trade union tactics. Sam wrote about how most union contract bargaining presupposes capitalist property relations, makes them stay intact and within the limits to negotiate only bread and butter issues. Taking this fight outside of purely economic sphere and into the political sphere is essential not only to win real power for our class in the workplace, but it may even be necessary even just to win a contract for us at Starbucks, because the courts stand as an obstacle in our way of getting a contract. So I find myself here 25 years after the passing of Sam, in the middle of a US labor revival led by young socialists and communists, in the middle of yet another US proxy war in Ukraine, while a new one is being brewed in Taiwan. And these circumstances could easily demoralize and frighten the average person. But to those armed with revolutionary Marxism-Leninism and a global class perspective passed down to us by Sam, we must trade in any fear for hope, knowing that we have the tools to handle it. As conditions become more dire, the potentiality of a revolutionary situation continues to ripen, and when it arrives, we have to be prepared. So, what is Marxism to me? Marxism is an attitude. Marxism is a revolutionary, scientific socialism freed from the sectarian cage that has bound much of the political discussion on the revolutionary left. Marxism is understanding which side you're on at all times without delving into eclecticism. Understanding that there are contradictions within our class camp, but that despite them, it still constitutes our class camp, and that our position is to defend and to strengthen it. Marxism is uncompromising anti-imperialism, whether that is supporting oppressed nations under the threat of the US empire abroad, or supporting the struggles of oppressed nations within the borders of the empire, like the struggle for self-determination of Black and Indigenous peoples. Marxism is understanding that the special oppressions of racism and national oppression, sexual and gender oppression, and oppression of those with disabilities and others are not secondary to the class struggle, but they are essential components of the class struggle. They must be at the forefront of our fight, not left to be sorted out after the revolution. To paraphrase Comrade Larry, there won't be a revolution if these oppressions are ignored.
2 more minutes, RJ.
Marxism is showing up for every fight, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. If we can be there, we are there. Our comrades showed up for the Amazon labor union before there was any indication that it would be making headlines as it has. But they didn't show up because they knew that the ALU would win. They showed up because the ALU are on the front lines for our class. Consistency and militancy is what won me to Workers' World Party after years of hanging around with the Buffalo branch. When it came time to get serious, I knew I wanted to be with the folks who never backed down, who I saw at every single protest with a sharp analysis on every single struggle. I'm a Marxist-Leninist walking in the footsteps of Sam. I try my best every day to maintain an unshakable optimism against the most dreadful capitalist system, because I know that we can win. And that's what the Marxist attitude means to me. So long live Comrade Sam and build a workers' world.
Well said, RJ. Thank you. Next up, I want to introduce Sarah Flounders. Sarah is a member of Workers' World Party's International Relations Committee and is a member of the New York branch. Sarah helps to coordinate the work of the International Action Center, the United National Anti-War Coalition, and the Sanctions Kill campaign. Thank you, Sarah.
Well, thank you, comrades, and welcome. Last night, a U.S. fighter jet shot down with an air-to-air missile a little Chinese weather balloon bobbing on the jet stream, supposedly invading the U.S. More ominously, this week, a 4-star U.S. general in a leaked memo predicted war with China in 2 years. Air Force General Minahan, head of Air Mobility Command, predicted that the U.S. would be at war with China over Taiwan by 2025. He detailed the preparations, demanded stepped up training and drills with specific orders: defeat China, prepare to fight and win, be prepared for deployment at a moment's notice. Air Force, Army, and Marines are on board. On January 5th, there was the largest ever launch from a US base of huge transport aircrafts as training for a naval blockade of China and a massive missile and air assault on mainland China, the Pentagon's air-sea battle strategy. China condemned this as reckless, provocative, and meant to put pressure. The Pentagon spokesperson said it was needed to preserve a peaceful, free, open Indo-Pacific. This includes Japan doubling its military budget and US access now to 9 bases in the Philippines. So while escalating the US-NATO war against Russia in Ukraine, the US is preparing at breakneck speed for war with China. It's a desperate effort to maintain US deteriorating global dominance. Means the US is willing to risk nuclear catastrophe because the ruling class fears far more the economic and social crisis confronting capitalism and the reemergence of the class struggle. So we opened this session with the question, why are class consciousness and international solidarity our most powerful weapon? To pose it another way, imperialist war is capitalism's chief weapon, capable of breaking class consciousness. The video clip of Sam Marcy defending China 30 years ago warned that the US and China are in constant struggle. China is a higher social order. China's very existence is a threat to US imperialism. Sam Marcy's deepest concern was that the workers here in the US be always linked to, always show solidarity with the working class and the oppressed and developing nations under attack by US imperialism. Marcy was determined that we see the world in terms of class, the working class. That's why our name, Workers' World. It takes constant vigilance from the working class and the imperialist center to not be pulled in by social chauvinism, racism, and war propaganda. In every war, there are left and social democratic collaborators, political forces who jump ship, who side with, go along with the ruling class and their excuse for war. Now, in a powerful book, Bolsheviks and War, and in so many talks, Sam described again and again how at the start of World War I, the working class in Europe held hundreds of seats in parliaments, had daily newspapers, control of unions and major industries in France, Germany, Britain, Italy, and so on, all pledged they would oppose the coming imperialist war and use it for the liberation of the working class. But when the war exploded, every socialist party bent under the pressure, voted to fund the war, recruited for the slaughter. Everyone except Lenin and a small handful. They made a revolution when the workers turned against the war, as they did, as they will. Sam Marcy wrote and spoke again and again on the importance of confronting imperialist war, even if our numbers at the beginning are small. He pushed us to build coalitions, and especially to pull in organizations of the oppressed and workers' groups and community groups, get resolutions from union locals, look to the grassroots. Sam especially pushed us to oppose every form of imperialist war. Workers' World Party initiated most of the campaigns to impose sanctions, the imperialist starvation of developing countries, the economic weapon. Many peace advocates found it quite acceptable to promote sanctions, not war. Marcy was really determined to train a combat organization in Lenin's view of revolutionary defeatism. We are for the defeat of our own ruling class, the defeat of this monstrous war machine. We're not neutral. Every gain of the ruling class anywhere in the world is a defeat for the working class. When imperialism wins, it's a disaster for all workers everywhere. Consider the defeat of the Soviet Union in the decades-long Cold War. It was heralded by the ruling class and the Social Democrats as a new era of peace. The Cold War was over. They claimed that the trillions spent on weapons would now be spent on infrastructure, the great peace dividend. Every national peace organization in the US and Europe closed its offices and staff, literally disbanded. Workers' World Party was alone, in saying no. This means a new era of unrelenting war, colonial reconquest. This horrendous victory for the ruling class immediately meant open season on every developing country that had been protected under the Soviet umbrella. There was a new era of war in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yugoslavia. Everywhere workers had gained some control of their own resources and raised the living standards was under attack. The countries of Eastern Europe were looted and rolled into the capitalist market, forced into the NATO war machine, every social program cut to the bone. So in conclusion, I want to say we're now on the eve of a capitalist catastrophe. A year ago, the US, through NATO, launched a war in Ukraine. It was planned for years. The US predicted an easy victory. Russia would collapse, would be dismembered within weeks by economic sanctions. But the refusal of the countries of the global South to go along with the sanctions is a stunning turnaround. Trade with China is a viable alternative. It's a new day and a dangerous moment. War with China is planned, so is war with Iran and Korea, continuing war with Russia in Ukraine, and Workers' World Party exists as a combat organization inside the working class of the US to challenge this relentless war drive. Build a workers' world.
Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate that. Now I am proud to introduce Sharon Eolis and Maddie Johnson. Can we spotlight? Once Sharon and Maddie turn their videos on, we'll be able to spotlight them. Great, okay. Maddie is a transgender comrade from South Dakota, now operating in the Portland branch. She has worked in history education and assisted living and believes socialism is the only counter to climate change. Sharon has been a member of the party since its founding in 1959 and is a retired nurse and union delegate on behalf of the nurses. Sharon, Maddie, and I will be reading a summary of some of the tributes to Sam, past and present. Okay. Take it away, Sharon.
Okay. Comrades and friends. Comrades and friends, we will read samples from the comments we have received from the worldwide workers' movement. All have paid tribute to this webinar and wished us success and urged the further collaboration of our parties. First, Workers' Party of Korea, known as the DPRK. Dear comrades, the Workers' Party of Korea is well aware of the life and exploits of Comrade Sam Marcy. He devoted himself to the struggle for realization of the working class cause. His activity in supporting Korean people and demonstrating solidarity with us will be remembered by our people. Comradely, Workers' Party of Korea, DPRK. Next is a note from the Danish Communist Party. Dear comrades, nothing is more relevant than sharpening our understanding of imperialism and sharing the understanding with the younger generation. The world is indeed troubled these years, threatened by a new Cold War, which the declining American empire is trying to impose on the peoples of the world. The Danish Communist Party says no to sending weapons to the proxy war in Ukraine, and we demand peace negotiations to stop the suffering of the working class in Ukraine and in Russia, and we say no to economic sanctions. And that's the Danish Communist Party says no to Cold War on China. Long live international solidarity, and signed from the Danish Communist Party.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to read remarks from the Socialist Party of Bangladesh. Dear comrades, we pay our respects to the memory of the great revolutionary Sam Marcy and recall his active life, which sowed the seeds of class struggle among hundreds of revolutionaries in the United States. The movement and interests of the proletariat in every country are rooted in the same perspective. It is therefore imperative that the political parties of the working class unite more closely in common interests. Our party and the Workers' World Party have had a long-standing friendly relationship. We believe that this solidarity and friendship will further enrich the working class movement of our two countries. The teachings of Comrade Sam Marcy will make our path smoother. Red salute to Comrade Sam Marcy. Long live proletarian internationalism and long live fraternal relation with the Socialist Party of Bangladesh and WWP. Again, that's from the Socialist Party of Bangladesh. And now I'll read remarks from the Citizens Poll of Panama. Comrades, we appreciate Sam Marcy's consistent internationalism and his permanent attitude of solidarity with the peoples who fight for freedom and socialism. The threat of a new world war appears closer every day for humanity. While we cannot agree with how the Russian government is waging war in Ukraine, we must denounce the perversity of the United States and its NATO allies as the provocateurs of the conflict, the suppliers of weapons, to try to force a crisis in Russia at the cost of the lives of the Ukrainian people. In Latin America, too, solidarity and internationalism help our peoples to strengthen their struggle for political transformations that will allow us to overcome the domination and exploitation to which U.S. imperialism subjects us. Thank you. From the Citizens Poll of Panama.
Statement from the Party of Communists USA. Dear comrades, in 1959, Sam Marcy founded Workers' World Party, which has a long history of not only fighting against imperialism and in defense of socialist countries such as Soviet Union, Cuba, and Democratic People's Republic of Korea. WWP was also one of the first communist organizations to fight against homophobia and for gay liberation in the United States. WWP plays a very important role in the anti-war movement, having led the most important demonstrations against the Iraq War, Vietnam War, and other acts of US imperialist aggression in the last 50 years. The Party of Communists USA mourns the death of Sam Marcy and remembers him as one of the greatest fighters against imperialism and for socialism in the United States. Long live socialism, communism. Long live Marxism, Leninism. Long live the anti-imperialist struggle. Central Committee, Party of Communists USA. And now from Freedom Road Socialist Organization. Dear comrades, Comrade Sam Marcy was an outstanding revolutionary and steadfast opponent of imperialism who made many contributions to the struggle for socialism in the US and internationally. On a personal note, I had the good fortune to meet Comrade Marcy at the International Communist Seminar in Belgium and could not help but take note of the clarity of his views and consistency with which he advocated them. There's a deep and long-standing unity between Freedom Road Socialist Organization and Workers' World Party. Some like to talk about left unity. We practice it. We will never forget the assistance you provided us when we were facing FBI raids and grand jury repression. As Sam Marcy might say, we're on the same side of the barricades. Long live the unity between WWP and Friezo. Mick Kelly, Political Secretary.
Go ahead.
Okay. From the Union of the People of Galaxia, UPG. Comrades, we know that the teachings of Comrade Marcy have been fundamental in the formation of what today is the Workers' World Party, represents your party fighting for socialism in the heart of imperialism. That has not forgotten the principles of internationalism and solidarity with all the peoples who fight for our national liberation as a path towards a socialist future. Among his contributions, we dare to highlight a work of September 1993, in which started from Lenin's work on imperialism. He contributes with analyses that can help us situate some aspects of the delicate international situation marked by the war of Ukraine and the attempt of the USA to maintain its hegemony and unipolarity. Greetings from the Galactia, Strength in the Struggle, Union of the People of Galaxia. Call for communist revival in France. Dear comrades, more than ever, when the various capitalist classes are getting their backs closer to the proverbial walls, the class struggle are likely to increase in intensity and unity, solidarity and clarity. Are urgently needed, for the class enemy will not go gently into the night. Towards such ends, we hope that the future will see solidarity and coordination of actions which will fuel our ongoing struggles. Today, the situation is urgently dangerous for the working classes as a specter of general war and worse of nuclear war is throwing the shadows over our worlds. Too many red lines are being crossed daily by the bourgeois cliques who are now are not free to openly and without restraint throw their support towards Nazis and fascism coalitions. In this perilous hour, in this hour of remembrance, we extend our gratitude and solidarity for your arduous and continuous labor in the class struggle. Call for the communist revival in France.
Thank you, Comrade Sharon. I believe now we will be watching a video from Sam Marcy, and I ask all panelists to turn off video so we can focus on that.
But the question still remains, why did it advance in Europe so quickly? Why did Europe, and in particular Germany, get ahead, see? Why, see? First of all, Germany got ahead, see, because of the waterway transport, see. It was able in Europe, to advance more quickly because it had access to the seas. That's one thing. The other thing is that technologically, they got ahead earlier than others. Okay. Now, if you listen to them, the Germans, they got ahead because they're smarter and more cultured and all that. And that's the basic reason. And the one who plays it up most, or did it most, was Hitler. We are above everybody else. We're ahead in everything because we are or as the Jews would say, we are the chosen people. That's what the Bible teaches them. We are the chosen people, not we. Not some other African group, but we are. And you know, that already creates a basis for hatred on that score. Okay. Now, why did the Russians make the revolution first, see? So, all right. Now, so up to a certain point, they were considered the most backward ones and looked down upon, and then all of a sudden they made the revolution first. We don't have to know all the conditions, but we know that it's conditions that did it, and most of all, economic conditions. Today, the U.S. is involved in competition with Germany and trying to restrict its development. Now, that's a fact. The U.S. is, at the present time, trying to restrict Germany in Europe and elsewhere. It is also trying to restrict, of course, Japan. But in my opinion, it's only my opinion, they're not pushing as hard as they really are on Germany, because when Germany, it gets the edge, it also has the ability to promote itself as the leader not only in the particular technology, but in technology overall and in culture overall. And we don't want to say no to that. But what we want to do is to internationalize. Look, we're all part of an international tendency of capitalist development, which brings about the proletariat, which is the most international class of all, and lays the basis for solidarity. So that even when it becomes the competition between two socialist parties, let it be cooperation. And at the same time to watch out for all elements of chauvinism or racism, and that we be the first to recognize these things and to be able to correct it. You can't discuss international politics without being aware that there are chauvinist conceptions all around that we have to overcome.
Hello? Okay, so
Go ahead, Jimmy. We can hear you.
hold on a second, sorry. Okay, great. Yes. Okay, so we can start. Okay, so great. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, comrades. My name is Jimmy. My pronouns are he, him, and I am a member of the Philadelphia branch of the Workers' World Party, and I have been so for 2 years going on. So this is going to be a really nerve-wracking experience because everyone has made so many amazing speeches and comments. So it's going to be a tough act to follow, but I'll try my best. So anyway, here we go. As capitalism reaches its breaking point, more and more people are realizing that the so-called American dream they've been sold their whole lives is a mere mirage. The spark for many people was the Great Recession of 2007, when many people lost their houses, their jobs, their savings, and any semblance of a stable future. Fearing the masses discovering the instability of the capitalist system, the ruling class started looking for alternative ways to diffuse class consciousness among the people. Beginning with the Tea Party movement of the late 2000s and continuing all the way into the MAGA movement in the present day, billionaire oligarchs have invested millions of dollars to platform politicians and ideologies that promote easy answers to systemic problems. Instead of looking at imperialist hegemony and the way it destabilizes foreign governments trying to create a better life for its people, they point the finger at immigrants who are escaping the wretched conditions brought forth by such interference. Instead of thinking about how companies can use their wealth to create jobs instead of paying off politicians, they pass the buck to Black and Indigenous people and the alleged way they benefit from affirmative action. In doing so, the elite hope to drive a wedge between workers of all races and all nationalities. And more importantly, they erase the ongoing disenfranchisement of Black people, Indigenous people, and immigrants alike. During an ever-growing precarity, it is easy to wish for a return to the good old days and the long-gone ability to own two cars, and a white picket fence. But for many in this country, especially Black and brown people, those good old days were never good. They were filled with violence and dehumanization and disenfranchisement in the name of securing basic human rights. In recent years, it's becoming clear that those human rights were extremely provisional. In addition to being victimized by the capitalist system, people of color are being brutalized by the police, having their sacred lands destroyed, and are being victimized by reprehensible hate crimes. Through their common culture, shared by centuries of marginalization under a country based on slavery and genocide, many people of color racial groups in the United States fit under the Leninist definition of nations. As nations oppressed under a legacy of settler colonialism and capitalism, Black, brown, and other people of color are entitled to a complete autonomy and self-determination to resist a dominant nation whose very existence depends on its disenfranchisement, whiteness itself. Sam Marcy, the founder of Workers' World Party and the comrade who we are honoring today, put it succinctly when he said that there cannot be any unity between the workers of the oppressed and oppressing nations as long as the workers of the oppressing nation do not recognize and do not advocate the right for oppressed nations to self-determination. As the specter of fascism tries to divide the workers along racial lines, it threatens the ability of comrades to recognize not only the oppression of Black and brown nations, but the hegemonic forces which thrive on its disempowerment. Having said that, we will now hear from our panelists of party speakers who will be addressing the following questions. A, why did Sam stress that understanding the national question was the acid test of the correctness of a revolutionary Workers' Party program in relation to class oppression in general? And B, why is defending self-determination an important component in building class unity? And so first off, we will introduce Monica Moorhead, who is a member of the New York branch, a Workers' World managing editor, editor of the Marxism, Reparations, and the Black Freedom book, and also a 3-time former presidential candidate. So whenever you're ready, Monica, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Comrade Jimmy, and welcome everyone to this important webinar. Comrades and friends, Sam Marcy made the following quote at the end of his 1984 article, quote, "Black nationalism and white chauvinism, Marxism and national oppression," end quote. We promote and must propagate the right to self-determination, but which road to take for liberation must be decided by the oppressed nation itself. A revolutionary working class party promotes class solidarity, irrespective of which option an oppressed nation chooses. The neutrality of the party in this respect is the strongest pillar of working class multinational solidarity in the struggle against capitalism and imperialism. The bourgeoisie denies and closes the road to both separatism and integration. They neither wish to complete the bourgeois democratic revolution for political equality, nor allow social and economic equality, nor will they permit the development of a movement for an independent, separate state, end quote. Sam defended the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who allied himself with the former leader of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, when Jackson was running for president on the Democratic Party ticket in 1984. Jackson came under vicious attack for accepting Farrakhan's endorsement, but both Farrakhan and Jackson were labeled as being anti-Semitic on the part of the ruling class, to drive an artificial wedge between Black and Jewish people. These individual attacks were a smokescreen for attacking the Nation of Islam, a Black Muslim mass organization founded on the principle of separatism in response to racist state repression. This is an example of self-determination for all revolutionaries and communists must and should defend, regardless of agreement or not of one's program, to demand any formal equality denied systematically by the powers that be. Fast forward almost 40 years later, and Sam's words still ring true. Just a few days ago, one of two Muslim women representatives in Congress was ousted by the Republican-led House of Representatives from the powerful House Foreign Affairs Committee, accusing her of being, quote, anti-Semitic. This is the same representative, Somalian-born Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, who was attacked along with 3 other women of color representatives during the Trump administration. It is less controversial to defend Black people when they are being fatally shot by police or white vigilantes. But when it is an individual whose position lies within a reactionary institution, such as the Democratic Party, there is more gray area because of the unfortunate white chauvinist views regarding nationalism of the oppressed on the left of leftists, as Sam alluded to in the video clip. Whether national oppression has expressed itself in bourgeois forms or revolutionary forms, self-determination has to be consistently defended when it comes under attack by our class enemies, and those forms take on an international character. Representative Omar is a bourgeois politician who happens to be Somalian, and that within itself cannot be ignored. Besides being African and a woman, the underlying reason why she was ousted from this horrible committee is because she implicitly criticized governments condoning Israel's massacres of Palestinian people in the occupied territories. The ruling class scapegoats anyone who threatens their world hegemony, especially as its military garrison state of Israel becomes more and more isolated. When Dr. King opposed US foreign policy in Vietnam, instead of just sticking to civil rights, the ruling class decided to permanently silence him. Understanding the national question and the right to self-determination goes beyond defending an individual like Representative Omar against right-wing attacks. It is about defending the most oppressed within our class because of divide and conquer white supremacy. It is about defending the Palestinian people, Black people, Latino people, Indigenous people, and other oppressed nationalities who have suffered as whole nations from profit-hungry, capitalist genocidal practices when sovereignty is at stake. So to defend Ilhan Omar is not equal to defending the Democratic Party, the other pro-big business, pro-war party, but has to be extended to defending Palestinian, migrants, and other people of color's right to self-determination in order to forge working class unity, in order to pursue the class struggle for the socialist revolution. To end with Sam again, quote, the whole struggle of the working class, as well as the oppressed people and their allies everywhere, is to recognize that there can be no real independence, freedom, or equality as long as the monstrous system of capitalist exploitation and imperialist oppression remains. The struggle for any and all concessions must and will go on. And each concession won is a building block in the struggle for emancipation from imperialist finance capital, end quote. Class oppression is primary, national oppression is not secondary. Long live proletarian solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, for that wonderful, amazing, provocative speech. That was so amazing, wonderful. And next we have Deborah Rodriguez, who is a fellow member of the Philadelphia branch and a Mundo Obrero editor. So whenever you're ready, Deborah, you can start.
Thank you, Jimmy. Peace, peace. Thank you, comrades, for having me here today. In order for any organization to even consider destroying the system of imperialism, white supremacy, Western hegemony. It must defend the self-determination of the most oppressed Black, brown, and colonized nations of the world. Puerto Rican people on the mainland and US have been a colonized nation for over 400 years. The people have struggled and fought for their land and the right to live a dignified life. Since its arrival on the shores of Puerto Rico, the US has ruled over the archipelago with policies that have extracted the self-governance powers that should be in the hands of the Puerto Rican people. The imposition of the Jones Act, the Gag Law, and the Foraker Act, combined with the unbound pillaging of our land and control of our economy by foreign invaders and some of our own compradors, have shown this has been a class war waged on the Puerto Rican people. My people have resisted from day one, with the firm and unrelenting understanding that we have to control our destiny as a nation. From the Antillano and abolitionist Ramon Emeterio Betances, to the nationalists who stormed the Capitol in 1954, Lolita Lebrón, Rafael Cancel Miranda, Andrés Figueroa, and Ervin Flores Rodriguez, the leadership of Albizu and Juan Antonio Corregel, to the solidarity of Roberto Clemente with the Nicaraguan people, the love that the Young Lords Party had for the people to take over Lincoln Hospital in Bronx, New York, to demand free health care. Former political prisoners that laid themselves on the line for the revolutionary love for their people, such as Oscar Lopez Rivera, Luis Rosa Perez, and Ana Belén Montes, recently released after years of serving a sentence in solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. The same fight lives today in the voices of the Puerto Rican masses, demanding the ousting of a foreign electrical company, Luma, that's replaced union-protected jobs for Puerto Rican people with foreign consultants, persistent increase in electrical bills, all while people experience blackout that places them at health and physical risk. The people have resisted against the Promesa Act passed by Obama and its governing board, La Junta, a group of people who are enemies of the Puerto Rican working class. The Korean policies that impact education, pensions, salaries, healthcare, and the theft of our land. And our conditions here in the US are no better. Puerto Ricans in the US are often struggling with similar conditions they face in the mainland. The poverty rate is slightly higher among Puerto Ricans in the US than other Latino groups. Puerto Ricans are among the 56% of the Latino population who are part of the unjust criminal justice system. Evidence that being a citizen of the US doesn't translate to a decent and just life. These conditions are similar to those faced by the global South and the internal colonies of the US. The only way that this white supremacist, patriarchal, genocidal settler state will be dismantled is building solid and principled alliances with the working class and most oppressed nations. Their freedom and self-reliance guarantees the freedom for all. Lenin understood why it's necessary for a call to be workers and oppressed of the world unite. Peace, and que viva Puerto Rico libre, que viva Puerto Rico libre y socialista. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for that great speech. So next on the agenda itinerary is Dante Stelbino, who is an international representative for the Southern subregion of the UE, including the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE Local 150 or 150, whichever you prefer. Dante is also on the coordinating committee of the Southern Workers Assembly and a member of the Durham branch. So whenever you're ready, Dante, the floor is yours. Okay, sorry, Dante, are you able to unmute yourself or?
You can move on to the next speaker.
Okay, sorry, I'm really sorry about that, Dante. Next we have Keisha James, who is an enrolled member of the Wampanoag tribe and of the Gayhead Aquina, co-leader of United American Indians of New England and a member of the Boston branch. So whenever you're ready, Keisha.
Thank you. Many things stand out about Sam Marcy, including his brilliant and prescient writings and his dedication to class truth and the world revolutionary struggle. But what stands out to me most about Sam Marcy was his rejection of the idea that the national question, that is, the question of the right of oppressed nations to self-determination, is secondary to the class question. In this country, founded on the genocide and stolen land of Native Americans and built by enslaved Africans, many white leftists tend to dance around the national question as it raises many uncomfortable questions. Chief among them, can there be unity between white workers and oppressed nationalities? It is clear that Marcy grappled with this question extensively, ultimately coming to the conclusion that any revolutionary party was destined to fail as long as it did not have a correct analysis of the national question. As Marcy wrote in 1983, quote, "Upon the solution of the national question may very well depend the destiny of the working class in the struggle against capitalism as well as the future of socialism," end quote. It is for this reason that Workers' World Party has always defended the right of oppressed nations to self-determination, and why Marcy considered the national question to be of the utmost importance. This idea of the national question being a primary concern was groundbreaking in itself, but Marcy took it one step further by including Native nations in his analysis. Despite the fact that hundreds of Native nations are held captive in this prison house of nations, our inherent and ancient sovereignty is rarely recognized by many who call themselves Marxists, and we are almost always excluded from analyses on class and race in the United States. When thinking about the national question in the context of Native peoples, it is important to remember that we are ancient and legitimate nations, and that our sovereignty does not originate from a settler government, but is instead inherent. It is essential in any future revolution that the concept of land back be respected, that Native nations be able to choose their systems of governance, and that the very common, gross, paternalistic view of the so-called Great White Father, the government, looking after his children, the Indians, be eradicated. Marcy was one of the first Marxist thinkers to grapple with what self-determination might look like for Native nations, and the fact that he referred to the national question as an acid test of the correctness of the general political program of Marxists speaks to his commitment to the liberation of oppressed nations. Marcy's thinking around Native self-determination continues to influence the party to this day and has resulted in over 50 years of Workers' World Party support for the Native struggle. That support has ranged from the 1973 Wounded Knee takeover, the 1975 Menominee takeover of a monastery on their land in Wisconsin, the 1990 Oka crisis, work on behalf of many Native political prisoners, including, of course, Leonard Peltier, and the ongoing decades of support from my own Boston branch to the National Day of Mourning protest in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I would like to end my comment with a quote from a 1978 article written by Sam Marcy, which reflects upon the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee, which was a watershed moment in the Native American freedom struggle, where the American Indian movement seized and occupied the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Marcy wrote, quote, "The Indian people are not alone in the struggle. They are a great and glorious detachment of a vast and invincible army of the oppressed and exploited that is rising all over the world in the struggle against the fundamental enemy of humanity, with its citadel in Washington and Wall Street." It was not for nothing that Lenin expanded Marx's slogan, "Workers of the World Unite," into "Workers and Oppressed Peoples of the World Unite." This union of the working class and the oppressed is the invincible protagonist that will ultimately overthrow the decadent ruling classes and reconstruct society along rational lines, without privilege, without oppression, and without exploitation of any kind. Only this union can spare the world the havoc and destruction the decadent ruling classes will unleash if they have their way and are not stopped on their reckless, mad road of plunging the world into a Holocaust. Only this union can lay the basis for a socialist transformation of society by the abolition of the capitalist system and the casting of its ruling class into the dustbin of history. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next on the itinerary is Gloria Rubach, who joined Workers' World Party over 50 years ago in Houston and is a founding member of the Texas death penalty abolition movement. So whenever you're ready, Gloria.
I am having trouble starting my video. Oh, okay. Good afternoon. The national question, as analyzed by Comrade Sam Marcy and Workers' World Party, has been so important to us here in Texas as we fight not only imperialist wars and killer cops, racist border walls, but also very notably in our fight against the death penalty. While there are many people opposed to the death penalty, the organization that comrades in Workers' World Party helped found and our leaders in today has raised the question of national oppression like no other. In fact, we are criticized by some very well-funded organizations for always, sorry about my dog, for always talking about the fact that no government in this country has any authority to imprison or sentence to death people of oppressed nations. Like Comrade Sam wrote about, there is racism, yes, for sure, but there's also national oppression. Because Black, Native, and Indigenous people are oppressed nations within the boundaries of the US, they have the right to determine their own destiny, their own lives, and their own political decisions. One of the first death row cases we worked on here in Texas back in the 1980s was that of a man named Clarence Branley. Clarence was a Black man who was a custodian at a high school in Conroe, just north of Houston. There was 4 other custodians who were all white, and a young white woman was killed in a volleyball tournament or during a volleyball tournament before school started in 1981. So there was an outcry to find the killer before school started. Well, they arrested Clarence and an older mentally disabled man and took him in. One of the cops looked at them and he pointed to Clarence and he said, "One of y'all is going to hang for this." And Clarence, since you're the N-word, you're elected. Clarence spent 10 years on death row and faced several execution dates before a mass struggle finally freed him. Comrades, here in Texas, fully 75% of those on death row are people of color. And keep in mind that Black people are only 12% of the people in Texas, from the cops to the courts to the prisons. The racism and oppression against these people is, well, prevalent. We say that executions are legal lynchings. We know the history of where executions came from. We say that they are racist and anti-poor, and it used to surprise us how critical people were of us, even though they were opposed to the death penalty. They'd say, well, you don't have to always talk about race. Well, we do this because we want all people to be involved in the struggle to abolish the death penalty, including those who look like the people sitting on death row. And we're the only death penalty organization anywhere that is truly multinational. It's because of Comrade Sam's writings that we have learned how to incorporate the national question into our active work against executions. We're based in a 50-year-old Black community center, and the only split we've ever had in our organization was when, when some people left because they said, we shouldn't be housed in that center. The neighborhood is too dangerous. Well, we thank Sam for explaining the relationship of the class struggle and the national question. He taught us well. We carry on in his memory as we fight for the liberation of our class here in the US, whether in the streets, in the universities and study groups, or in the prisons. Que viva compañero Sam Marcy, abolition now.
Thanks, Gloria. Next, we have, if Dante's ready, Dante Stabino, who is an international representative for the southern subregion of UE, including the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE Local 150. Dante is also on the coordinating committee of the Southern Workers Assembly and a member of the Durham branch. So take it away, Dante.
Greetings, comrades. Glad to be here with you today. I'm speaking, on this panel as a revolutionary Marxist-Leninist, like all of us, as well as a trade unionist, and seeing, and learning from the legacy of Sam Marcy, who worked in the steel mills in New York, and the way that he connected the struggle of the workers and the plants to the struggle for national liberation against racism, has inspired my work and our branch here in Durham, North Carolina. Sam Marcy said, the solution to national question may very well depend on the destiny of the working class and the struggle against capitalism, as well as the future of socialism. This is such a powerful quote. For our work here in Durham, rooted here in the US South, we recognize the centrality of the Black freedom struggle as it connects to the struggle for workers' power and revolution. We have to acknowledge that nearly 60% of all Black people in the United States live in the southern states. This is a region of the country with the lowest unionization rates, with the lowest wages, the highest concentrations of laws that ban or limit access to abortion, with the lowest corporate taxes that drain the critical public sector safety nets. This is a direct result of the white ruling class in this region being terrified of the masses of Black workers having any power, and of the direct failures post Reconstruction after the Civil War to really build a full revolution. Sam also said, to many in the progressive and working class movement, the relationship between national oppression and class conflict appears as a choice between two supposedly contradictory phenomena. When I first joined the party, I was really, really impressed. The first party conference I came to in the early 2000s, the slogan of the conference was class is primary, but national oppression and racism is not secondary, right? Meaning that as a party, we see that it's not contradictory to hold up the struggle for working class revolution at the same time as we hold up with the same vigor that we hold up the support for liberation movements. And in fact, we can never see true revolution if we don't uphold liberation struggles. We do not sublimate the class struggle. We not sublimate the Black liberation struggle or other national liberation struggles to the general working class movement. We fight to uplift the most oppressed. In the context here in the South, that's to build support and leadership of Black workers. This is a task we've carried out as we follow the leadership of comrades and Black Workers for Justice by digging into Black majority public sector workplaces like sanitation workers, water department, housekeepers at the universities, mental health workers across North Carolina as we build the North Carolina Public Service Workers Union, UE Local 150, and also link this to a broad Southwide network of worker cadre called the Southern Workers Assembly. Our view is to lift up the voices and conditions of Black workers as a guidepost for the entire working class. By winning over white workers to this struggle, we also lift up the conditions of all workers. When talking about the connection of the national liberation to advance the struggle for global revolution, we must acknowledge that many advances here in this country, in this capitalist country, advances in expanding access to public resources, always try to co-opt the energy and often the initiative of the Black freedom movement, whose initiative has created many public programs. For instance, in this country, we would have no public education at all without the Black freedom struggle. It was Black people who created their own first schools, who led to the establishment of the public school system to access for all people as we know it today. And as Lenin said, when workers and oppressed of the world unite, we can build a mighty movement beyond the containment of the capitalist system. And as Marcy described talking about that slogan. The so-called progressive, peaceful, and competitive capitalism had evolved into monopoly, which not only required vast expansion at the expense of oppressed people around the world, but also exacerbated and intensified every type of national oppression at home. Let's continue to make the connections between the devastation of the US war machine and imperialist bankers across the globe with the struggles of everyday workers here and the liberations of the nationally oppressed to win power. This is our only path to global socialist revolution. Peace, comrades.
Thank you so much for that wonderful speech, Dante. Thank you. Next, we have Ed Childs, who is a former chief steward for Unite Here Local 26 that organized major strikes and walkouts and led union delegations to Cuba, Iraq, and Vietnam. He is a founding member of the Boston branch. So whenever you're ready, Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jimmy. I want to talk about a particular struggle that we had here in Boston that Sam helped orchestrate. And it dealt with not only the working class, but it was a big part was the national question of self-determination. And it was in 1970s when the NAACP won a court case to integrate the Boston school system. Boston was the last major city in the country to have this school system integrated. What he showed us was you have to assess the whole situation. The situation then was similar to what we have today. The high unemployment, there was a huge economic crisis in the 70s, high inflation up to 20%. And the right wing was moving strong. The right wing was developing a fascist movement throughout the country, and its core was building up in Boston. There was a organized fascist movement here. It was huge. It was developed over 6 months. They had demonstrations every week from 20,000 down to 2,000. And when the buses rolled in September, every news station in the country showed buses of Black children being stoned, and not one police officer stopping it. The Boston police had actually voted to not protect Black children going to school. And so the state had to bring in state troopers. The fascist movement was led by the Boston City Council, all of them, and the school committee, and the Boston police. Now, the party says that we have to do something. And we tried to do little things. And Sam said, no, we got to do something big. So assessing the economic situation, the fascist movement, and the attacks on the Black community and Latin communities, what we assessed was there had to be a national march. And it had to be significant. So the comrades in Boston, we used to hitchhike down to New York every weekend and talk to Sam about what to do. And the first thing we've got to do is bring the Black community and get them together and see what they want done. And we did. There was two factions, one behind the NAACP who had fought hard for the integration of the schools. And there was another more nationalist movement, which had one huge schools of within the Black community, which were going good. So we had Black leaders that we got together with, and they formed a united front of the Black community under the slogan, "We say no to racism." That it wasn't, so that was self-determination, because you didn't take one side or the other. And so what we did from there is that with the leaders of the Black community, we started building within the working class. And what we did is we met with the tenant unions, the community groups, environmental groups, school groups, PTAs, and formed a very hardcore group. It was very difficult because the fascist movement was violent. And then Sam said, what we got to do now is we got to go after the unions. We can't disallow the fascists to have the unions. The leadership of the AFL-CIO was silent, but we went after some of the unions, and 7 unions opened up their doors to us. There, we got to talk to the union membership and formed the union contingent in our march. So it was quite successful. We did weeks and weeks of organizing. We got 30,000 people to march. We did over 100,000 leaflets. We organized community organizations, and we put a stop to the fascist movement. They could not grow, and they pretty much dissipated at then. They haven't had a huge march since then. Obviously, they're growing now. The lessons of that was, one, we can take, as Marxists, we can take these struggles on. The national question was core. Other groups had tried to do something. They didn't take in the national question. They couldn't get their first step in. Also, you had to be willing to take on the fascists. You had to out-organize them. And from that, we recruited our tough fighters. That's what Sam wanted. These are the fighters that we wanted. They understood the national question. They understood organizing. Today, we see the same conditions. The economic crisis is starting to deepen. Unemployment is starting to come in. Inflation is starting to rise. And there is the right is moving. The fascist movement is starting to grow. Very similar to what we had then. And we got to learn the lessons of Sam Marcy, that we can take it on, but it's done through assessing, through Marxist understanding of the economic situation, the situation with the working class, the Black and Latin communities, and do what needs to be done and do it. Today, we see that the union movement is actually smaller and actually probably more reactionary than it was back then. Today, we see the heads of the AFL-CIO going to Afghanistan and supporting a fascist movement there. But we have some inroads to the unions. We've done a lot of union work. And so we've got to use what we got, get into the working class, and use the tools, self-determination, the national question, and how to organize the working class to make a revolution in this country. Thank you very much.
Steve Harmony, who the Philadelphia branch of Workers' World Party and a contributing writer for the paper. And Harmony will read Ashada Shakur's tribute to Sam Marcy from March 4th, 1998. So whenever you're ready, Prince Harmony.
It is not often when we are lucky enough to find a person who is willing to devote his or her entire energy to a struggling for a better world. Sam Marcy was such a person. I did not know him personally, but he touched my life in a profound way. It was always with great interest that I read his articles and his books. Of course, I did not agree with everything he said, but he made me think, helped me to reach within myself, to study, to analyze, and to grow. He was a thinker and doer. He was a sincere man who dared to wrestle with complex theoretical matters. He had the discipline and energy to take firm positions and to be faithful to his revolutionary convictions. He was a man who was greatly respected by progressive activists of different political tendencies. He is a man who will be remembered. He is a man who will be sincerely missed. With respect and solidarity, Asada Shakur.
Thank you so much for that. And last but certainly not least, we have Maya X, who is a member of the Disability Justice and Rights Caucus and is a member of the Boston branch, and will read Mumia's tribute to Sam from March 14th, 1998. So whenever you're ready.
Revolutionary greetings, comrades and community. I will read this message from Mumia Abu Jamal. I'm writing to extend my condolences on the loss of your comrade, Sam Marcy. I can tell you from conversations with John Black that you deeply respected and loved the man for many years for his commitment and organizing skills. Not having ever met him, I can't begin to suggest that I have some idea of his personal qualities. I do know, however, of his impressive organizational and propagandistic skills, and I can only admit my admiration that he has left a young, vital, politically adept cadre behind him is one hell of a tribute to him. The many and various movements that Workers' World is involved in for workers, for national minorities, for the oppressed on behalf of a radical anti-imperialist idea is a further tribute. Thus, my condolences are mixed with that acknowledgement. With my best wishes, Mumia Abu Jamal. As I read the statement from political Mumia Abu Jamal, I envisioned Comrade Sam Marcy raising his fist to say, brick by brick, wall by wall, we must free Mumia and all our political prisoners now. Onward, comrades. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that speech and excerpt, this concludes the session about self-determination. So thank you everybody for being a part of this, and it was a great joy, even though I was pretty much shown up by everybody else in this session, but it was still a great learning experience, and I learned a lot, and I hope everyone did too. Thank you so much.
Nationalism, either the nationalism of the oppressed or the oppressors. See, we are for the nationalism of the oppressed and the struggle against the oppressors, but that's about it. See, we're for proletarian internationalism, for communist internationalism. That's what's important, and we are not the hasty vanguard elements to defend, well, you get capitalism started in Europe, and therefore the socialist movement started in Europe, and therefore we're first. That's the thing you want to completely avoid.
Greetings, comrades, and thank you so much for sticking with us during this program today. My name is Teddy Kelly. I am on Workers' World's Executive Committee. I'm also co-chair of the Prisoner Solidarity Committee of Workers' World Party, along with Marinda Chrisman in Houston, Texas. This final session for today is about turning our face to the working class, and that's why we just watched that short clip of Sam Marcy talking about proletarian internationalism. Regarding myself, I joined Workers' World Party in 2017. I was a very different person when I joined the party. I've learned so much. It was part of having a party, a revolutionary communist party that prioritizes the condition of especially oppressed workers, which is why I was comfortable and finally had a space to come out as a transgender lesbian, and was met with, I think, I felt so lucky to be met with nothing but, hundreds of communists supporting me in that decision. I'm so glad that we had this last discussion on the national question, but I want to turn our focus now to who is the working class. When we talk about the working class globally, I want us to think about who is privileged and who is not, but more so our social and financial role that we play in society. A worker is someone who, despite whatever commodities and comforts they may have accumulated, is only a few paychecks away from hunger and houselessness. Even the most prestigious tech workers are one email away from being an unemployed worker. We've seen this happen to tens of thousands of people just in the last few months. The difference between a gig worker and an incarcerated worker is sometimes no more than a traffic stop. When you have medical bills that you can't pay for, are you going to go to Jeff Bezos? Or are you going to set up a GoFundMe and ask for solidarity from other members of your own class? You know implicitly your social standing in society, whether you need solidarity from your mother, from your cousin, from an old college buddy, from your partner. You know implicitly that we go to the working class, not our bosses, not the cops, not the rulers of society. I want us to think in these terms about the differences between social status when we think about class. And I want us to think about who gains from our oppression and who gains from our sickness and who gains from our poverty, from the impoverishment of workers. And that is going to lead us to the question of who stands to benefit from the destruction of capitalism. And I want you to think about it this way, in terms of the role that workers play in society. If you don't show up to work tomorrow, right? It's Sunday, tomorrow's Monday. If you don't show up to work tomorrow, what's going to happen? You might lose your pay, right? You might even lose your job. If you work in a coffee shop, think about it. I want you to picture it. Your boss is going to be desperately calling and texting people looking for coverage. And if they don't get it, there's going to be a line out the door of customers trying to get their coffee. If you're a delivery driver and you don't show up, people aren't going to get what they bought. Commerce is going to grind to a halt. If you're working on a farm and you don't show up, then food will not get harvested that day. The produce will rot on the vine. And if you're a transit worker, if you drive Uber, if you drive a bus, and you don't show up to work, then other people aren't going to show up to work too. When we do something as simple as not showing up to work, somebody in a position of power is going to be stressed. Think of the power you have as a worker. If you do nothing, it can disrupt everything. If 3 of us don't show up, it's not just our boss who's stressed, it's our boss's boss who's stressed. If the whole store doesn't show up, Howard Schultz is going to find out and be stressed. Just the threat of withholding our labor wields enormous power. And as revolutionary communists, we're not just talking about work stoppages. We're not even just talking about a general strike. We're talking about what comes next. Because all the tools, all the skills, all the time and expertise that we all have as workers, I want you to imagine what it would look like if we were building what we want to build, if we were researching what we want to discover, if we were producing for our needs, not the needs of shareholders, if we were serving each other, not our bosses. Think of the accomplishments that have been achieved by Cuban medicine. I was just reading about the millions and millions of hectares of forest that have been planted just in the last decade by People's China, education, healthcare. And so as we go into this next section, I want us to think about our power as workers. And I want you to imagine what a global society with workers in command might look like. Not just tomorrow when we go to work, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now. And it's with that in mind that I want to introduce our speakers for this section. We're going to hear from our final panel of party speakers right now, some of whom will be addressing these questions. In this quote from Sam Marcy, without struggle, without everyday participation in every possible form of class conflict, no matter how small, dull, routine, or grandiose, the party of the working class will not become a reality. Struggle is the very essence of a revolutionary party. And in the Communist Manifesto, why do Marx and Engels characterize the working class as being the revolutionary gravediggers of capitalism? So, comrades, it's now my pleasure to introduce the first speaker on our panel, Richie Marino, who is a special education public school teacher, an anti-war activist, and a current graduate student at CUNY City College and a member of the New York branch of Workers' World Party. Welcome, Richie. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Teddy. So today I just want to respond to the Sam Marcy quote, which Teddy just read, which ends with struggle is the very essence of a revolutionary party. When I read that quote, I started thinking about my own participation in what is a revolutionary struggle. I think that when a lot of us start thinking about what it's going to take to overthrow capitalism and to bring down the imperialist US empire, we might feel overwhelmed. We might feel like we don't even know where to begin because it seems like such a daunting task. But what I took away from this quote is that we have to start somewhere, no matter how small, dull, routine it may be. Because as revolutionaries, we have to be in the struggle every single day of our lives. And that means that we have to make sacrifices in order to make that happen. In order to leave you with something a little bit more practical, I think that when it comes to building a revolutionary party and raising class consciousness among workers, I think it's really important to start off by getting to know your neighbors. I think a lot of us who live in major metropolitan cities may not even know our neighbors that live in our buildings, that live on our blocks, that live in our neighborhoods. And I think that one of the very first things that we need to do is that we need to get out into the community and we got to start talking to our neighbors. We got to start learning their names. We got to start understanding what their struggles are. What are they worried about? What are they concerned about? When you start being part of the community and understanding the needs of the community, you can really show up for the community. And when you show up for the community, when you're out there, whether to support the community, whether it's to support a struggle to free somebody who was wrongly incarcerated, or a struggle to prevent the shutting down of a public high school, which is, I'm just naming some struggles that have happened in my local community of the South Bronx. People start to know you and people start to trust you. So when you start talking about what it's going to take to bring down capitalism and imperialism, they're going to start taking you seriously and they're going to start joining you. Very recently, I participated in UNAC's call to organize during MLK Week an anti-war and anti-imperialist event to really build the movement against this US NATO proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. And one of the things that I did that was a little bit uncomfortable, I will admit, is that I invited everyone in my building to a meeting where we would discuss MLK's positions on imperialism and capitalism. And it was a really easy way for folks to be introduced to revolutionary ideology and theory and perspective. So I just want to end again by referring to Sam Marcy's quote, whereby it doesn't matter, you know, how small, dull, or routine your activism or your work may be, but we got to start off somewhere, and we got to do a little bit of work every single day. And that may mean that, you know, we have to make sacrifices here and there to put this work and to further the work that we're doing in our communities. But that's really how we build towards revolution, how we build a party to really liberate the working class from all types of oppression. And every single day, we got to be in the struggle, because as Sam Marcy said, struggle is the very essence of a revolutionary party. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richie. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Marilyn Kelly is a member of the Philadelphia branch, a registered nurse since 1976, and a proud member of National Nurses United. Marie, go ahead.
Thank you, Teddy. And thank you to all the amazing panelists and all the participants today. I'm really grateful to be a part of this panel. In his book, High Tech, Low Pay, first published in 1986, Sam Marcy wrote on the feminization of labor as more women were taking jobs previously only available to white males, but at significantly lower pay. My focus will be on the work of nursing, where women already were the majority of the workforce. Historically, nursing care was undervalued because it was believed to be an innate feminine characteristic and needn't be compensated monetarily, much like childcare and housework still. Pre-industrial revolution, it was female family or village healers who cared for the sick in their homes. As industries mechanized and cities grew, hospitals were established by religious organizations and charitable groups. The acceptance of germ theory and the adoption of aseptic techniques in the 1800s necessitated establishing hospital-based schools to train nurses. Medical and surgical technology advanced further in the 20th century, and the role of the nurse expanded to include how to operate high-tech gadgets and interpret data they produced. Monetary compensation was slow to catch up since nursing remained a predominantly female workforce. High tech has contributed to advancements in life-saving surgeries and disease cures. Who can pay determines who benefits, since the US does not have universal free healthcare. Instead, capitalists saw profit-making opportunities and have turned hospitals into money-making corporations with ever-expanding costs passed on to the consumer while cutting expenditures deemed superfluous. Nurses fall into the latter category, undervalued by hospital corporate heads because they persist in regarding nurses with all the old baggage about innate caring. Additionally, nurses can't be easily commodified, as say a surgical procedure or a course of antibiotics. Consider the analogy of nursing work compared to an iceberg, as Lily Galinas, editor-in-chief of the journal American Nurse, describes. The physical nursing task performed is only the tip of the iceberg. What is not seen are the countless skills a nurse uses to process and act upon information she gathers that will allow for the best medical outcomes and survival rates. All of the high-tech gadgets can never take the place of the complex nursing work performed below the surface. In order to do that work, nurses must spend enough time with their patients. Appropriate nurse-to-patient ratios are critical. That is why the current labor uprisings among nurses here and abroad is not so much over wages as over staffing. In conclusion, Sam Marcy in the last chapter of High Tech Low Pay offers tactics to use in our labor struggles. One in particular is the withholding of labor until unfair, unsafe conditions are resolved. Applying this strategy to nursing work will require organizing and educating nurses to be united in their refusal to work if staffing is subpar, and furthermore, to use their organized power to end profits over patients and fight for free access to healthcare for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And astute viewers will notice that that's my mother, who I couldn't be more proud of.
You do look alike.
Indeed, right? It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, my dear comrade who I owe so much to, Stephanie Hedgecoke, who is a 40-year member of Workers' World Party, a lifelong union activist, and a CWA member. Go ahead, comrade.
Comrades and friends, the working class in this country hails from all nationalities, all races, colors, gender and sexual identities, ages and abilities. Well, who are we? Hairdressers, truck drivers, freight rail engineers and conductors, electricians, cable installers, cooks, wait persons, coders, painters, plumbers, dock workers, air traffic controllers, pilots, flight attendants, baggage workers, farm workers, meat packers, bartenders, janitors, building maintenance, librarians, press operators, film crews, mechanics, forestry workers, grocers, warehouse workers. Well, this list could just go on and on, as workers make everything in this society run. Everything. The ruling class does no labor, it just reaps profits. Marx and Engels called the working class the only class that can be the grave diggers of capitalism. Only the working class has the capacity to shut down capital and empire. In Cuba, historically, in 1959, the workers in Havana occupied the banks and factories after the new revolutionary government had passed a law to nationalize the Cuban resources. The revolutionaries called for it, and the workers made it happen. More recently, on the 35th day of the longest government shutdown in US history, 800,000 federal workers, including air traffic controllers, were not being paid or had been furloughed. On January 25, 2019, the largest pilots and flight attendants unions declared, well, it's no longer safe to fly without proper air traffic control staffing, so they would begin to shut down the airports, starting with LaGuardia. A few hours later, the Trump government backed the hell down and announced a deal to end the shutdown. And the CWA flight attendants were planning for a general strike for February if Trump forced another shutdown. Now, we know the ruling class has kept class consciousness lower in this country from the beginning, using divide and conquer, divide and rule, by the racist legacies of slavery and settler colonialism to keep our class from action. Yet class consciousness ebbs and flows like the tides. There are times when conditions are so hard that working people snap into class consciousness. The growth of class consciousness is dialectical, like an earthquake. Pressure builds on fault lines till a moment when the faults move hard and fast. Today, we see a corporate push to force working people back to 19th century conditions. Piecework, gig work, piecework, paid by the job, not by your time. Not just for the youth, all ages of working people are under that gun. So our job as communists is to help build class consciousness by building solidarity among and for other working people, whether it's with joining picket lines, raising awareness of conditions, but even just urging respect for each other as workers on the job and off in every way possible.
2 minutes
Today,
left.
the working class must build solidarity with the Palestinians facing genocidal, Zionist apartheid in their homelands. We must build solidarity for all working people around the world who face the same enemy as we do, Wall Street, the banks, the corporations, and the imperialist war drives as the ruling class ever increases exploitation worldwide. Sam Marcy wrote that there has been a global war on since Korea. The bourgeoisie has long been aware of this. In his prior work, he had explained, it is not a war between the nations, but a war between the classes. In this war, the geographical boundaries are social boundaries. The battle formations are class formations. And the world line of demarcation is the line rigidly drawn by the socialist interests of the world proletariat. As capital attacks the earth itself with global warming, the sixth extinction, and unchecked use of extractivism and fossil fuels, what will be the breaking point when workers rise up to shut down capital and move to create a new system? Comrades and friends, global working class solidarity is the only way we will stop capitalism's war on the peoples, on nature, and save our earth and the very biosphere. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for that. Next, we're going to hear from Brian Shea. Brian is a member of the Boston branch, and he works in the party's Disability, Justice, and Rights Caucus. Take it away, Brian.
Thank you, Teddy, and thank you every comrade here and on the podcast, on the cast here for joining us today. I first met Workers' World Party in 1981 when I had just, like a year earlier, I had dropped out of college and I had gotten a job in what was then called the independent living movement. And it was the disability rights movement. And it was folks with different disabilities who were trying to break out of their isolation and meet each other and build solidarity and trust and organize solutions for everyday life. But what was going on in 1981 was the triumph of reaction was when the likes of Ronald Reagan was swept into power by the ruling class because they had decided they wanted to claw back the minor class concessions that had been won by organized workers, by the women's movement, by the Black freedom movement. They wanted to, there were some of them that wanted to repeal the Civil War. But there were a few of us who were dissatisfied with the response of the disability movement at the time. And we kind of, in Boston, we formed the Disabled People's Liberation Front. We, basically holding up the banner of the Vietnamese people who had kicked the imperialist hegemon's ass 5 or 6 years earlier. And in New York, there was Disabled in Action. There were all these groups all over the country that were coming together. And that's where I met Workers' World Party when we were in Boston. We were organizing an ongoing set of actions against an inaccessible movie theater chain. which refused to comply with the access codes. We would set up picket lines at their premieres, and there were folks that came on our picket lines and brought trade union solidarity with them, brought militant solidarity, brought working class struggle tactics. Anyone who crossed the picket line, we would yell, "Scab! Don't cross the picket line. You don't cross the picket line." It's little things like that. I learned that these comrades, they would become my comrades, on a matter of weeks later, that they were part of an organization, part of a communist organization called Workers' World Party. And when I went to my first conference, I met some of the founding comrades who they had learned from. And it was Sam Marcy, Vince Copeland, and Dottie, and Leslie Feinberg. And this was a revolutionary organization that saw the struggle of disabled folk as serious and as part of the class struggle. And that's what Sam was referring to when any struggle is at the center of a revolutionary party. But the vast overwhelming majority of people with disabilities are proletarians. We're not bourgeois. We don't own wealth that somebody else created. We either sell our labor to a bourgeois or a boss for a private wage, and the boss will try to pay us less because we're disabled, or we may be able to live on a social wage, which was won through struggle by workers organized in mass organizations and unions, wrestling concessions from the whole bourgeoisie or from a few bosses at a time. One of the foundational tenets of the iteration of the disability justice movement that has come about since 10 years ago, when folks with disabilities from oppressed communities and marginalized people, or LGBTQ people and BIPOC communities, were not being heard by the more traditional disability rights paradigm movement. But and they formed organizations such as the Harriet Tubman Collective and the Sins Invalid Cultural Group. And one of the fundamental tenets of disability justice movement is disability justice and capitalism are mutually exclusive and they cannot exist together. We, as folks with disabilities, are, as the rest of our class siblings, capitalism's grave diggers, because if our movement is going to succeed at all, we need to consign capitalism and capitalists to a museum of human prehistoric stuff that we never want to do again. So I will end on that note for now and live like Sam Marcy and build a worker's world. Thank you.
Hell yes. Thank you, Brian. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Judy Greenspan is a member of the California Bay Area branch. Judy is a union representative and chair of the Substitute Teacher Caucus of the Oakland Education Association. They have a long and genuinely impressive history in the fight for prison abolition and against LGBTQ oppression. Comrade, take it away.
Thank you so much, Teddy. So, comrades, one of Comrade Sam's most important messages to us as revolutionaries in Workers' World Party and to the overall US communist movement was and still is to turn our face to the working class. While this has always been the mission of Workers' World Party, we have redoubled our efforts in that regard over the past several years. This current economic period makes it more necessary than ever for us to ground ourselves in the working class and to join and support working class organizing efforts and to win over the most revolutionary elements of our class to our party. So I'd like to draw your attention to several articles by Comrade Larry Holmes on this unfolding crisis and our revolutionary response. Larry, in the best tradition of Marcyism, said that we need a class-wide rather than a shop-to-shop response to this crisis. And I will drop these, I'll drop the links after my talk. Honestly, and those of you who know me, I usually never have a hard time figuring out what to say, but I had a very hard time figuring out what to say today. I spent several hours, it felt like weeks, immersing myself in Sam's writings and videos, and I would urge you to do the same. Sam does have several videos on YouTube, on the Workers' World Party YouTube channel, and if you go to our website, you will see a whole group of published articles by Comrade Sam. And I just wanted to start out by bringing your attention to a quote. Of course, I mean, Sam wrote prolifically on many different topics. He wrote an article, March 9, 1995, entitled Karl Marx, Thinker and Fighter. And at the time he wrote, Lenin taught of Marx and Engels that above all, they were revolutionists. It is impossible to be a revolutionist in contemporary society without being actively engaged in the struggle of the working class against the capitalist class, with the aim of abolishing capitalist exploitation and imperialist oppression. And honestly, this has definitely always guided my life. And that's why it's sort of like, I didn't know what to say, because Sam was, of course, a writer, but he was also a doer. And how do you bring that about? I mean, Sam gave us a map and said, this is what we need to do. And we're still doing it. And we're doing it through our latest leadership. We're doing it through our new comrades. And there's so much that we have to do. So comrades, as revolutionaries, we're always involved in struggle. And in the interest of furthering it's a good thing that we have some extra time based on how quickly we're going through this program. So, and in the interest of furthering the working class struggle, it is often necessary to take a lone principled stand. And that was one thing that Comrade Sam taught me, and something that I also brought into the party from my own personal history. That to me is one of the most important lessons of Marcyism. Every political problem must be analyzed thoroughly, and as material conditions change, so must our political perspective. We must be very fluid in our tactics. So within the working class struggle, this flexibility of action is very important. When the first public organizing of an Amazon union in Bessemer, Alabama started, Workers' World Party immediately jumped in to build a solidarity movement to support it. We formed within the party the Mass Work Committee. And at that time, no other organizations on the left were really looking at the struggle in a major way. We didn't involve ourselves because it was a popular movement, but because it was necessary for the success of our class. And that initial organizing, both by the Bessemer, Alabama Amazon workers and also the workers at the Staten Island Amazon plant, struck a chord in the rank and file labor movement and also eventually in the left. While our first solidarity efforts were modest but widespread, Workers' World Party was able to organize solidarity demonstrations during the pandemic over a 2-month period in over 60 cities each time. Our initial solidarity work helped build the solidarity movement that exists today. Since that time, Starbucks workers, we've heard, have unleashed an amazing organizing drive, and many organizations on the left have jumped in to help. It's a different playing field now. What remains missing is any widespread support from organized labor. And our job now has to be to demand that support wherever and whenever we can. Sam Marcy would point out that organized labor could be organizing solidarity strikes to support the efforts of Amazon, Starbucks, REI, Chipotle, and other workers to form a union. Not only funds, but workers, organized and unorganized, on the picket lines would make a great difference. Here in the Bay Area, we've had the inspirational example of the International Longshore Workers Union, Local 10, who over the years have engaged in many solidarity worker actions to demand everything from free Mumia Abu-Jamal, to stop the Israeli bombing of Gaza, to stop the closure of Oakland public schools. Sam would have applauded these actions and urged us to support them in whatever way we can. We have also supported solidarity strikes by healthcare workers during the pandemic. Several of the healthcare unions went out on limited solidarity strikes. Imagine what would happen if the larger unions did this and called for solidarity actions. It would be an incredible advance for our entire working class. As Larry mentioned earlier, Sam Marcy had incredible optimism for the success of our class in the struggle for socialist revolution. The working class, and right now we can look internationally to see the amazing struggles that are unfolding, on a much more massive and on a more exciting level than what we're seeing in this country. The working class and oppressed of Haiti, the Philippines, and many other places are rising up against US-imposed austerity, poverty, and occupation. And we are all part of the same global class camp, and their war, their class war, is our war. We have seen many strikes and worker actions over the past 2 years, and more will follow. But comrades, our job as revolutionaries is to work with others to turn Striketober, that we wrote so much about, into Revolutiontober, where our class brings down the US ruling class and ushers in a socialist future.
Hell yes, Judy, thank you. So real as always. Comrades, next, it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Gillis, who is a member of the Boston branch. He was a 37-year member and elected leader of the Boston School Bus Drivers Union, United Steelworkers Local 8751, now working for the members. Gillis, take it away.
Thank you, Teddy, and good afternoon, comrades and friends. Recently, I was in a meeting with Comrade Larry Holmes, and I was reporting on some of the obstacles in Boston for Starbucks baristas trying to win their first contract with one of the world's largest, richest union-busting restaurant corporations. And Comrade Holmes said, there's only one thing for sure. Everything changes. And, you know, we got to hear him say that earlier today. And I flashed back then, as I did today, to Sam Marcy. And one of his favorite teaching subjects, the materialist science of change. Sam would ask comrades to imagine themselves on a beach, watching the ebb and the flow of the waves and tides, constant quantitative change, but amounting to the same beach, sometimes for a whole human lifespan. But if one were persistent and prepared, one might be there when an inevitable, epoch-changing tsunami wipes out the beach and maybe the mansions on the cliffs above. Qualitatively new change. Some, even on the left in this country, are still arguing about whether or not largely Young, many part-time baristas are workers, but not the party of Sam Marcy, who explained this changing character of the working class in 1986's high-tech, low pay. We moved early on to quickly join Starbucks Workers United's struggle, which in 2022 sparked the first national labor offensive since Reagan busted Patco in 1981, inspiring numerous Generation Union campaigns against icons of global capitalism, from Alphabet to Amazon. Since learning of the baristas organizing while in Buffalo to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Attica Rebellion on September the 9th, 2021, the Boston branch of Marcy's Workers' World Party resolved to be on the front line with the Starbucks workers as best as our capacity would allow. We have experienced an historical new generation of working class leaders, including many gender and nationally oppressed warriors, birthing a new consciously anti-capitalist workers' movement reared in the global Black Lives Matter streets. For 64 days round the clock last summer, baristas electrified the labor movement with a strike and occupation of a storefront on Boston's university campus. Teamsters shut down deliveries while other unions brought supplies and solidarity delegations. Barista leaders organized 24-hour picket, food, strike benefits, mutual aid, security, COVID-19 mitigation, media, legal aid, birthday parties with radical karaoke, and daily meetings, which made collective decisions very much like a workers' government at war. During overnight picket study groups, disciplined anti-capitalists from across the city read communist literature and debated US wars. This 2-month showcase of workers' power in the news on Boston's Commonwealth Avenue is what the local Democrat ruling class eventually decided to smash with Gold Star cops, armed Pinkertons, and lawyers. The Boston branch of Workers' World Party assisted this embryonic, revolutionary-minded barista wave to survive the year 2022 in this extremely unfavorable balance of power, providing sound systems, resources, political connections, meeting space, vehicles, and boots on the ground solidarity at dozens of actions. This is where Sam Marcy urged us to be, part and parcel of these big and small workers' struggles. Because in nurturing these relationships and helping to strengthen their force, the party can help tip the scale for the workers and give experienced guidance when the inevitable tsunami of global capitalist crises and class war hit the beach where we live, where we organize, dream, and fight so that a better world's in birth soon.
It's been 5 minutes. Oh, yeah.
Dare to struggle like Sam Marcy. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Comrade Gillis. I got chills when you talked about a workers' government at war. My goodness. Our final speaker for today is Martha Gravatt. Martha is a longtime member of the Cleveland branch, a Workers' World newspaper managing editor, and a retired executive board member of United Auto Workers Local 869, just to name a few things. Comrade, please take us home. And just remember to unmute, Comrade.
Struggle is the very essence of a revolutionary party. So true. When Sam wrote these words in 1972, it was at a critical juncture for our party. Our young revolutionary cadre, recruited to a large extent from the anti-Vietnam War movement, were going into the working class, including the organized working class, at a time when unions represented a large section of the workforce. And these documents that Sam wrote that summer leading up to our annual conference were to orient us. Face to the masses was our calling. We had to be Leninists, understanding the class character of a union despite its bourgeois ideology, its class collaborationism, and its ties to the Democratic Party. A union is an organ of class power. We are for working inside unions. That's where the workers are organized. But the changing character of the working class, as described in Marcy's high-tech low pay, has led to other forms of class organization. So we're in solidarity with groups like the Laundry Workers Center and with independent unions like the Amazon Labor Union. It's them versus the boss. Which side are you on? Ask that question through the lens of the global class war. Ask it in the microcosm of a particular labor struggle, and ask it in the macrocosm of the global struggle against imperialist hegemony. Even if we are fighting an individual worker's grievance, we don't go into a meeting with a view towards hearing the other side while we represent our side. This would suggest both sides, representing two antagonistic class forces, have equal merit. No, we shed all pretense of class neutrality. We are partisan to our class, especially the most oppressed. We are tethered to the global working class, and we bring that understanding into our unions. We don't view our politics and our union activism as two separate entities. Marcyism means being principled. That word is used a lot, but what does it mean? There are many examples, but it includes not shying away from difficult issues. Often that means confronting racism on and off the job, but it might mean coming out against anti-LGBTQ2S plus bigotry at work. Sometimes, for some of us, that means coming out of the closet. And being principled means being consistently anti-imperialist, even when we must take an unpopular position. On class struggle and the law, Sam had a law degree. Today, we see the limitations of the NLRB and fighting on the legal front. Sam understood how progressive labor laws are won and how they are enforced. To paraphrase a comment he once made at a meeting, the class struggle writes the signature on the law. Sam's understanding of the global class war was all-encompassing, from building working class opposition to imperialist war halfway around the world to now supporting the union drive at Starbucks and Amazon. We prosecute the class struggle in the Marcyist tradition. Struggle is our very essence. Class struggle was the essence of Sam Marcy. Down with capitalism. Victory to the workers and oppressed. We will win the global class war.
Oh, comrade, such a powerful way to end today's program. I want to thank all of our speakers and all of our comrades. What can I say? Everyone you've heard today is a member of Workers' World Party. These are people who I personally am proud to call my comrades and my friends as well. We're not just doing this to hear ourselves talk, and we're not just little boxes on your screen, on your laptop or your TV or your phone. We're doing this because we want to talk directly to you, because we know that if you're listening to this right now, as long as you're not a cop or a Fed, you're a member of the working class. And we want to struggle with you. We want to be in solidarity with you. And we want to build a workers' world. So everybody who signed up today, who's tuned in, who registered for this event via Zoom, is going to get a Workers' World subscription. Online subscriptions for the newspaper are free if you go to workers.org. And if you'll permit, I just want to make a quick plug. If you would like to donate to our organization, you can do that at workers.org as well. We also provide free newspaper subscriptions to anyone who is currently incarcerated. You can help us sustain that effort by going to patreon.com/WWP. I also really, really want to thank Mairead in Boston for technical assistance throughout this event. Saved us right at the beginning too. It was very appreciated. I want to thank Diane and Lynn and Phoebe for being our timekeepers for today. And I want to thank Sue Harris for putting all these videos together for us, and Alex M. For providing that beautiful slideshow at the beginning of our program. Comrades, if you'll permit me, I want to just say the 2 paragraphs from the introduction that Sam wrote to the Communist Manifesto. He said, "Only the proletariat in alliance with the oppressed peoples and socialist countries can lay the political and social foundations for worldwide solidarity. This is precisely because only socialism, which is based on planning and the common ownership of the means of production, can purge the worldwide market of its imperialist chaos, its unpredictable crises, and the reign of the arbitrary based on super profits. Indeed, the world market, as Marx said, makes national one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become more and more impossible." And Sam said, "It inevitably generates proletarian class solidarity, the truest basis for bringing about the solidarity of the human race." We're going to end our program today with 2 short videos and then the singing of the Internationale by our Cuban comrades on May Day 2022. Thank you all genuinely for attending this webinar. Thanks to all our comrades. And let me say it loud and proud, build a workers' world. I never had the opportunity to meet Sam Marcy, but I am very proud to be able to call Deirdre Griswold my comrade and friend. Deirdre is a founding member of Workers' World Party and an editor of Workers' World newspaper. So as we leave today, we're going to hear from Deirdre. Thanks.
I can't think of any speaker who, as much as Comrade Sam does, brings the theoretical conceptions of Marxism up to date to the very moment at which we are meeting. I mean, I can't think of almost any presentation that Sam has given that has not had something in it from that day's news. It's a hallmark of his to be able to make Marxism not only living in the sense that it's a guide to understanding contemporary events, but it's a guide to action as well. And that's the reason why it's important to be up to the minute on understanding what's going on in the world, because we are moving and acting to change the world. But at the same time, I can't think of a speaker who does as much as Comrade Sam does to constantly reevaluate the past, rethink the struggles that have taken place in contemporary, but also in our recent history, in the light of current events. And that is why I think we all look forward so much to this talk of his on the question of Lenin and his evaluation of the struggle in the Soviet Union between the political positions and forces represented by Stalin and by Trotsky. This is a question that Comrade Sam has spent his whole life in the midst of these political struggles. And yet we know that when he speaks to us today, he's going to have something fresh and new to say on this question.
But to be members of a party that hopes to bring about the socialist revolution, much more is required. It requires a strong, disciplined party where the members are accountable for their activities, where they don't participate in the activities and are not accountable, and not even the leaders are accountable, such as a weak, loose organization, not worthy of a party that hopes to overthrow the most monstrous despotism in European history, to overthrow the Russian government. The working class is a disciplined class. It's not the petty bourgeoisie that has a great many different and conflicting interests, many of them laudable. But the proletariat, by virtue of the fact that it is in large-scale production, or even small-scale production, the proletariat is disciplined by the machine. They come into work, they punch a clock. That's not what free intellectuals do. Again and again, Lenin hammered away at the need for a proletarian party. It is the proletariat that is the decisive class in the struggle for the control of the means of production. You need a strong, disciplined organization to deal not only with the intellectuals, but with the millions and millions of peasants, with the middle class, and beyond that, with the bourgeoisie. For a party that has such a lofty position on organization, it goes without saying that it would not only be rigid in organization, but also in its program, though in its political program, though it would be flexible in the highest degree on tactics and on strategy.
Long live the legacy of Sam Marcy.
Long live Sam Marcy.
Long live Sam Marcy.
Build a workers' world.
Build a workers' world.
Build a workers' world.
Build a workers'